Okay, this is for you who have missed the lecture this morning. I'm going to go over stuff real briefly. Your vocabulary words for this unit are peninsula, archipelago, tsunami, monsoon, and typhoon. Basically, a peninsula, we're doing Southeast Asia. Peninsula is a long piece of land surrounded by water except on one side. That would be an example of a peninsula. This is an island because it's surrounded by water. Archipelago are a group of islands. This is an archipelago. These are all the countries in Southeast Asia. A tsunami is a tidal wave. There's the Pacific plate colliding with the Asian plate, so there's earthquakes in the area, and it creates tidal waves. The monsoon winds, so their climate, we went over their climate briefly. They have these monsoon winds that rip through here. So in the winter time, they come from the Pacific Ocean. In the summertime, they come from the Indian Ocean. And these create high winds, which, of course, if there's a lot of movement in the atmosphere, you'll get heavy rain storms. And then they will cause typhoons, which are massive storms that cause flooding, which the area has a problem with. So the area is tropical because it is on the equator. So it's very humid and very wet. In fact, this area doesn't have any dry times at all during the year. But if you go to the north, as part of the mainland, of course, the mountains here, there's actually a rain shadow, and they do have a desert for them. It still rains there, but they do have a dry season where they'll have dry parts of the year, and sometimes they actually have droughts, which causes water shortages in some of their major cities. We also went over the geography of where people lived. The mountain regions separated groups of people naturally, so did the islands. So there's all these different ethnic groups and languages and religions and traditions that are separate. There's different people in all of them. And where these mountain ranges are, if you look at today, it's almost the borders of the country. So even today, those mountain ranges and rivers decided the borders of where the countries are today. Like here's Thailand, here's Vietnam, there's Cambodia, there's Laos, there's Burma or Myanmar. And then the islands have their natural border that's there. The interesting thing about where the people settled mainly is because of the big rivers. That's where all the fertile ground, even on the islands in Indonesia, it's where most of the people settled. They settled on the coast for using the ocean for trade, or they settled where they could farm for rice. The higher you go into the mountains, then you can create tea. One important area in history are these islands, the Maluku Islands. Basically, the Dutch from Europe came over here. This is the only place in the world you can find nutmeg and cloves, so they wanted that. So they traded heavily through here. So this strait right here is very important. So a lot of kings and pirates control that, because otherwise you'd have to sail all the way around to come up through the backside to get to here. So India's over here, and so of course the Europeans came through the Suez Canal, came through here, and they'd want to come through here to sail over here. So this was their source of conflict, people trying to control it because of the trade. The interesting thing about Southeast Asia, the main part we talked about, was the heavily influenced areas because of trade. So people from India and Europe are coming from this way. So this whole area is Hinduism from India. The Spanish settled the Philippines, so that's Catholic from the Roman Catholics. This area was Dutch, so there's Protestant over here. Indonesia, which is all of this, Indonesia is Islam. It's actually the largest Muslim area in the world. It's even bigger than the Middle East. So by population, this is the largest concentration of Muslims in the world. There's Muslim up in the Philippines too. Actually, there's Islam all over in pockets, but for the majority of them are here in Indonesia. And then you have all the influence from China coming down. Like Singapore is 70% Chinese ethnicity, so even though it's a separate country, most people who live in Singapore their family lineage came from China, so there's a heavy Chinese influence in Southeast Asia and from these bigger cities. The urban areas, the population, we look at the population, historically people settled in the river valleys, and today the highest populations are where those original river valleys were. So like here in Indonesia, that's the high population, but there's hardly any over here. Like in the islands, there's something like 60% of some of them are not inhabited, which is pretty interesting. You can see the Philippines is highly inhabited, high population. there's Saigon, Ho Chi Minh City, Hanoi, Bangkok, Yangon, all those places of high population. Singapore's down there, but that's mainly because of the strait. That has nothing to do with the river. It's from trade. So these big high areas of population follow the geography of the river valleys that are there. Like everywhere else we studied in the world, people are moving from the rural to the urban, and it's causing problems because all the people can't fit in these cities. For a place that has a lot of rain, they actually have water shortages. They cannot have enough clean water for drinking in these large cities. So it is an environmental problem. Of course, everyone wants to drive a car or a motorcycle. Air pollution is a big problem in all these large cities. And then when these storms come through, when the monsoons come in from the winter or from the summer, they create the typhoons. And then they will actually cause floods, and the floods will basically overrun their sewage, and the sewage will run into streets, and people get cholera and dysentery. So healthcare sometimes struggles, especially during the monsoons winds when they have typhoons and tsunamis. Those are the main problems there. That's a quick overview. You should be able to answer the questions with that. Cultural borrowing, we talked a little bit about that with people traveling and all the trade that came through. But you need to do these questions that are down here, 1 through 7, write them in a sentence. There's 7 sentences then for you, and send them to me before the end of the day, and you're done with geography if you've done your current events. Have a good day.